Okay, so I see it populating. Is that correct, Lana? I'll just see all the. We'll just give a few minutes. We have like almost. If you're joining us now, welcome. I'm just going to give a few more minutes. We have half the attendees logging in, another half coming on board.
There's something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop. Children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. There's battle lines being drawn. Nobody's right if everybody's wrong. Young people speaking their mind.
We will start on the dot at 11:05. Real quick logistics question for, can we turn off the, thank you. Real quick tech question for Lana. The attendees seems to have stopped populating. Is there a reason for that? Or maybe that's just
I think we just let
here
them
it goes.
in a waiting.
Okay, here they're coming. Okay, thank you. I'll get started. Thank you all for joining us today. Really appreciate everyone taking Sunday morning to join this important discussion surrounding Crip Camp. I'm Jean Kristen, the president of the Palos Verdes Peninsula PTSA. And with us today are the members and creators of Crip Camp and the stars of Crip Camp as well. Let's see, I'm so sorry. I want to thank especially Emmy Chang of the lead company for helping us make this happen and making the introductions. Before we get started, I want to go over some just housekeeping issues. Know that this is being recorded. There are also interpretation available for you. We have Spanish, Korean, Japanese, Chinese, and ASL. If you click on the icon for interpretation, you can click on Spanish, and then you can, for example, then you can mute the original audio so you can hear the discussion only in Spanish if you like. And that's what I have. That's very easy housekeeping. If you would like to text anything or send a question in, you will need to email that. And here is the slides. I'm so sorry, I didn't see that. So let me introduce first Dr. Brent Kuykendall, the principal of Palos Peninsula High School, to give a welcome on behalf of the school.
I just want to thank everyone for this opportunity. Panelists, we so appreciate you taking time this morning to be here. Our amazing student and other translators, making Peninsula proud. We appreciate all of you. And of course, the PTSA and Jean. I know a lot of work goes in behind the scenes to make something like this happen. And I'm looking forward to hearing everyone share out. This is an important discussion that both youth and adults need to be part of. And we are all better when we understand and hear more about different people's lived experience, because we all have different paths. We can all contribute to the greater good. So Thank you so much for this opportunity. I look forward to hearing from all the panelists.
Thank you, Dr. K. I'd like to briefly introduce each of the panelists. We have Jim Lebrecht and Nicole Newman, the Academy Award nominated co-directors and co-producers of Crip Camp. We have Judy Heumann, the legendary film subject and disability rights activist icon. Thank you from Washington, D.C. for joining us. We have Cindy Liu, parent, founder, and chief advocate of We Belong 805, UCLA Tarzan Center's advisory board member and TEDx speaker. We have Mr. Kurt Yeager, working SAG-AFTRA member of the Committee of Performers with Disabilities, honorary WGA member, and Dr. Anjali Forber-Pratt, Paralympic medalist and assistant professor at Vanderbilt University. And I also wish to thank and welcome our two moderators, Dr. Linda Mona and our student moderator, Dina Etwal. I'm going to hand this over to Dr. Mona now to moderate and ask the questions that need to be asked and let our discussion begin. Thank you. And thank you all for joining us.
Yes, welcome all. I'm so thrilled to be here today and to be your moderator. My name is Dr. Linda Mona, and I come to you today wearing many hats, one of which is that I identify as a disabled woman, wheelchair user. I am a psychologist who has worked in the area of disability and with people with disabilities for the last 20 years, as well as being an advocate in many professional organizations around disability inclusion issues. I also am a wife, and I am the proud parent of two Peninsula Panthers, and so which is why the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee got stuck with me this last year. I suppose we're stuck with each other. So, and I can't tell you how impressed I am that a high school diversity, equity, and inclusion committee wanted to do Crip Camp and wanted to have this discussion, which I, of course, have spent most of my career in this area and think it's important, but it's nice to have this shared experience of importance together. And I also want to provide a description of myself, which is important for those people who have visual differences or who need some help with interpreting images. So I identify as a white woman. I look white. I have green eyes. I have brown hair, and I have dark pink glasses. I'm wearing a black jacket with a green blouse. I'd invite other people to describe themselves as well as we move on with the panel today. Do we have Dina joining us?
Yes, she is here.
Okay, Dina, you know, we would not have a PTSA association without students, and we felt that it was really important to have a student with us today moderating. So Dina, do you want to introduce yourself to our audience? Is she around? Okay. Well, maybe she's having a hard time coming on here. Oh.
Yeah, it says that she is a phone call in listener. So she might have some connectivity issues.
Well, Dina's just recently joined our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, so we'll see if she's able to participate later on. But and thank you, Jean, for giving us this brief bio for all of our panelists, which of course we could go on and on with their resumes and everything that they have done. Being mindful of time, I'm going to start us off with jumping into our first question. And so I want to move over here to Jim Lebrecht and to Nicole Newnham, who are the Academy Award nominated co-directors and co-producers of Crip Camp. You know, this movie in so many ways, you know, presents a taste of the history of the disability rights movement. And it shows us about disability community identity through pride, through discrimination, and through oppression. And so with that in mind, let's jump into our first question to the two of you. As you reflect upon Crip Camp and the success that it has reached, what do you think is the most important message that this film has conveyed to others about disability and the disability civil rights movement?
Perhaps I'll start. Hi everybody. Really great to be here. My image description, I am an older white guy with kind of unruly hair today, square black glasses. I've got a charcoal color t-shirt, behind me is a red wall with some posters on it and a couch. Nicole and I really, we really set out to try to make a film in which we would reframe what disability really meant, both for people with disabilities and without, to start conversations. And I think, well, I know that we've been able to do that with our film. So that has felt really incredibly rewarding. And the international reach of our film, because of Netflix and Higher Ground with the Obamas, has really, made that possible. I would just say that this is just one story from the disabled community, and that I'm really, I really hope that I believe that we've opened some doors, or smashed open some doors, in regards to people in the entertainment industry understanding that there's actually more than just a couple of tropes around disability, and that our community is full of people who are joyous, sexy, every range of who everybody is, as opposed to saints or depressed people. So.
Great, thank you. Nicole?
Hi, I'm Nicole Newnham. I am a middle-aged white woman wearing a pale blue shirt and sitting in front of a very bright window. I apologize for the bad lighting, but I just moved into a new house and I haven't figured out my Zoom locations. I have red glasses and I'm really happy to be here with you all. Jim's right. We really did set out to try to reframe disability with Crip Camp, and it has been incredibly gratifying to see the ways in which the conversation that the film has sparked has shifted perspective. And I think, I think about the moment when the film premiered at the Sundance Film Festival and received a standing ovation, and we all wondered, why were people applauding? Because we were trying so hard to move the film away from the really destructive tropes that usually are out there when people with disabilities are seen in the media, the sort of tragedy thing or inspiration porn. And so why were people applauding? And we realized people were applauding the great civil rights leaders who were on stage in front of them. Judy got a whole standing ovation just for herself after the first standing ovation when I passed the microphone to her. And that's when we thought, okay, we have succeeded here, because, people said in the audience that night, why don't I know this story? Why hasn't anybody told me this story? And Judy said, well, this is an audience of educated media people. Maybe you should ask yourselves why you never saw it before, because it's always been there. This story, one of the great civil rights stories of US history has always been there kind of, since it happened. And for us to embrace as part of our American story of how we can protest and we can gather together and we can create change. And I think what people saw around disability was that somehow the ADA was charity, or they didn't know if their kid had a 504 plan. Where did that come from? So I think the fact that people now are seeing disability rights as something that has been fought for and something that's part of everybody's that is to everybody's benefit, but that was brought by this powerful group of activists. That is something that I'm just really, really gratified to see more and more people coming to an understanding of that.
Thank you, Nicole. Yeah, and we always say representation matters. And it does matter, but sometimes we represent and people don't hear or see what is happening. And I think you're right. People did see this in a very different way. And many of us who work in the field have heard that before. Why haven't I ever thought of this? It's been there. Like, what part of this is it penetrating now, and why are you seeing it? So thank you so much for those words. And I'm going to transition over to Judy Heumann, known as one of the mothers of the disability rights movement. I can't say enough about Judy. She's been an activist. She's done so much on so many different levels. And, Judy, your presence is really powerful in this film. And I want to know, what do you feel this documentary, why has it been so important to others, both inside and outside the community?
Thank you very much for doing this. And at some point, I'd like to know what the interest was, like why, because I think that would be helpful to all of us in our answering of questions. I am a white 73-year-old woman. I got my hair done yesterday. You can't see white anymore. And I'm wearing a kind of orange-ish brown t-shirt with matching earrings and I think brownish red glasses in our foyer with pictures of family and friends. And behind me is our dining room office with plants and a dining room table. I think that's a very interesting question. And honestly, I wish we could do some kind of a study on the answer, because I think we're all speculating. I think, as Jimmy and Nicole have said, many people expressed why didn't they know this story. And I think this story really has allowed people who wish to look at what we've discussed as some of the barriers. And then I think part of the question is, beyond getting emotional around it, which of course I think is very important, is what are people going to do? And I believe that one of the big issues is the lack of exposure and meaningful discussions mean that many people don't know what to do and how they can be involved. And I think that's really a critical question that we need to be dealing with, which is, how do we continue to expose people about what exists in their communities? You know, reach out to people. And I think it's also, I'm sure a percentage of the people who are saying this are people who have hidden disabilities, may not know they have them, or may for the first time be realizing they do. I'm really struck by, I mean, I get stopped in my neighborhood all the time. And like yesterday, someone stopped me and the woman was almost in tears. And I think Jimmy and Nicole probably have experienced this too, because when we were in Utah for Sundance, there were a number of people who were very emotional. It was like a story that was out there that allowed those with disabilities to be less hidden. And then, of course, this other population of people who have hidden themselves. So I think it is definitely that people are seeing a story that maybe they've known something about or seen, but the absence of real media journalism really discussing disability in a way that the film is asking that it be discussed. Because the film, as Jimmy and Nicole have said, it's really, we didn't use the word inspiration yet, but it's really moving away from, like in the last year and a couple of weeks ago on CBS Evening News, there was a story of a woman with Down syndrome who is golfing. And the story could have been, people didn't think that she was able to golf. Her father and family really recognized that golfing is something that she should do because she's interested in it, and that Down syndrome shouldn't be a reason for her not to try. But instead, it came out as this inspirational, amazing story about this young woman with Down syndrome who is learning how to golf, and completely distorted an appropriate message. And there have been a number of these kinds of stories over the last year on, the major networks where they're highlighting disabled people doing things that they've been kept out of doing because of discrimination. Like a boy being able to play basketball in his high school or doing a game with them as this big deal and heroic thing. So I just think we have so much learning to do. And that's why I was wondering, why the school was interested in this topic, because I think it's really critical that we work with kids and families when they're younger to really fill that void of why
Great.
didn't we know?
Thank you, Judy, and thank you for that question. I think Jean wants to put, I have a response, but I really want to hear what Jean has to say as our PTA president, PTSA president, in response to your question. Jean, did you want to address that? Is she frozen? She might be frozen. Let me respond.
Thank you.
There you
Judy,
are.
thank you so much. Can you not hear me?
It's very robotic sounding, Jean.
You hear me? Okay, I'm sorry, Judy, thank you so much for posing that question. Okay, I apologize. Talk with Judy a little later and answer the question. Maybe I will write to her in the chat, but go ahead and respond, Linda.
Okay, yeah, I'll just say that one of the things I think that occurs, right, on any diversity, equity, inclusion committee, or what are the topics and how we're going to discuss it. And it's, and like I've only been on the committee for a year, but I will tell you that, I think including somebody like me with lived experience, somebody with professional experience, I think thinking about things more broadly when we try to take, we try to take disability outside of just accommodation and what does it mean, and let's talk about these inspirational stories, like let's talk about the meaning and what does it mean like at a larger level in our society and in the media, but also what does it mean for our campus? How is disability represented in our campus in terms of our our special ed department, our faculty, our staff, how do we go about that? So I think that we're really trying, my impression is that we're trying to move in a direction that is not just more inclusive, but that we look at justice issues and equity issues and try to amplify it more. So I think that's my impression of where it all came from, but I'm sure Jean might have a different response, or somebody else on the PTSA has a different response.
Thank you, Linda. I hope you can hear me now because I really want to talk about this.
Go for it.
The reason is it goes back to what Nicole said. I watched Crip Camp because I wanted to form a film club for our DEI committee. We've been doing all sorts of great things during the pandemic, food and culture demos, book clubs, and I want to do a film club focusing on disability. And I watched Crip Camp and I walked away with it, with so many of the audience did in Sundance. Why didn't I know about this? And I wanted our students to know, and being in a position where I could invite all of you and host something of this stature, first of all, was a dream. I didn't think it would be happening, but I just appreciate y'all being here because I think it is so important to build the bridge between what you all fought for, you all meaning during the Crip Camp participants, and making such a big change in our society and bridging that to the next generation, our future leaders. And my hope is this is not just a one-off, but a launching off point where our students, when they are planning activities and events, they're going to be automatically thinking inclusivity. So if we're talking about a school dance, are they going to be providing noise canceling devices? I think it has to be a mindset change. And it's such an honor for them to hear directly from you all, and the hope is Crip Camp, it shows us the past. We're discussing kind of what's happening now. And then the students are really what can be done in the future with their knowledge now and moving forward to the next generation. So my niece has Down syndrome, but there's so much I didn't know about this world. My sister has been educating me, and it wasn't until Crip Camp that I realized I had really no idea. And then I realized the gift that Linda Mona has been on our committee. And so I just been learning and educating, and I feel like I'm a pretty open-minded and also inclusive person, but there's so much I still need to learn. And that's what I wanted to bring to our school and our students. And we have several teachers here with us. I saw Mrs. Dibble here. She is the faculty advisor to our student leaders. And I know Dr. Coleman, who is the faculty chair of our English department, he has shown the movie, and so has Mrs. Dibble in their classes, in their leadership classes. And I think many, if not all, their students are here tuning in. So I also wanted to give you all the opportunity to address students directly. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you. Judy, did you want to respond to that before we move on to the next question?
No, just thank you very much. And I guess one comment, so I think when looking at films, it would be great to look at films like Crip Camp that give positive images, but then really to look at the plethora of films where disability is misrepresented, because I think it's really important to be able to have discussions about what is wrong in the way disability is being represented, so that that children and adults can become more critical in their thinking.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
A
Thanks, Jim.
couple of films I'd recommend briefly.
Yes, go, Jim.
Code of the Freaks, which I believe is on Amazon, is kind of a look at disability representation in film. And I also really just love The Reason I Jump, which was based on a book written by an autistic young man. And I just thought it was really excellent.
Excellent. Thank you, Jim. Thank you. Okay, we are going to move along to Cindy Liu. So Cindy is a parent. She is the founder and chief of and advocate of We Belong 805. She has an awesome TEDx presentation talking about what it is like to be a parent of a child with a disability. Cindy, we are so happy to have you as a parent, to have your voice here with us today. And I'm just wondering, what do you think is the significance of Crip Camp, and what does it tell us about ableism in terms of our history and present day?
So I get the easy question. I'm just kidding. Thank you, everybody. Boy, it's just an honor to be in the room with so many of my personal heroes. Image description. I am an Asian lady rocking the COVID hair. I curled it today, sliding into 50. Got some lipstick on. I have a gray blazer and sort of a flowery bluish greenish thing, and you cannot see it, but I'm wearing slippers. So I just wanted to say thank you. And I think, sorry, Judy, you guys must get this all the time. I'm that weirdo who wants to like try to collect the lock of your hair to show appreciation. But I think that what you have all done with the ADA and the battles that you have fought has allowed our generation to sort of take for granted. But that also shows to me a weaving of accessibility into our culture. So what I would say is how far we've come, but how far we still need to go. I mean, An Octopus won this Oscar area, and I'm still a bit bitter about that. And I think that without access and representation in those rooms, I think that shows ableism, because they don't really recognize the power of the story. They don't recognize the power of people making and writing the story. And I just want to go back to the other question, that in California, there's something called the FAIR Act, and I don't know if that's the same in other states around the country. But the FAIR Act in California is to embed this learning from disability, civil rights movement, LGBTQ+, and those stories to be embedded more into the perspective and the history of what's being taught. And so, I think when it comes to what does it tell us about ableism, is that it's still unfortunately really prevalent. I think access has moved, and thankfully the idea of access has moved from physical access to social access, representation within all the rooms that we need representation in. And I think it's it's sort of this idea of somehow being a little more subtle. Like in my TEDx talk, someone came up to me as my daughter was eating ice cream and looked at her. My daughter, that's my sister, Jean Kristen. So her daughter is her niece is my daughter with Down syndrome. And we were eating ice cream at McDonald's, and someone came up to her and looked at her and looked at me and said, "Is she smart?" And I thought that was the dumbest question I've ever heard, but that is the level of ableism where you feel like you can go to somebody and say, "Is she smart?" So I think I answered the question, but I don't think so either, because it's a big question.
It's a big question, and I appreciate, Cindy, your realness and authenticity and responding. Those of us who live with disability day in and day out, and our families, and anybody who loves somebody with a disability is in that family, right? That we confront so many things that are difficult. That when we can have an event like this or some time together where we celebrate this oneness and this understanding that other people don't feel, it is quite emotional. And I certainly am resonating with that as well.
And I think, you know, Cindy, in the film, there are at least 3 places that I can remember where I was like ready to cry. And I think crying is an important emotion. I think it also is partly anger and frustration. So it's a women's issue. I'm sure there are men that have the same thing, but I think we do it more, and getting behind what it is and continuing to express how we're feeling is great.
Thank you, Judy. And I also just want to say the part in the film that resonates to me where you said, "I'm tired of being appreciative for accessible bathrooms." I mean, I think that's the frustration that comes from, is we're put in a position to be appreciative when really we're just pissed off. And that's, for me as a parent, that's what motivates me.
Yeah. Well, anger can be very useful. You know, it helps fuel us. Jim, did you want to say something before we move on?
Cindy, I just wanted to say that, you know, your emotions are so right on. Nicole can attest to this, but there were months as we were doing our virtual panels and stuff that I couldn't get through one without crying, and really struggled to understand exactly what was going on here. But I think that it is living for so many years without people not understanding or discounting me and other people, that to finally be able to get this representation out and this image of disability that is really authentic and real, it just kind of releases something. It's like we struggle for so long, and when you see something happening that you think will actually really bring positive change, it is a relief, because we all carry this burden.
Well, now you've given me license to just flow like the river.
That's okay. The struggle is real. The struggle is real. All right, I'm going to transition.
I just want to add one more thing about ableism. I think it's the one form of bigotry that is still acceptable, because it's based on ability. And for me, legislation like the FAIR Act is so important, because we've learned, and we're not there on all of these other issues, but at least we understand and recognize, or have a muscle that's practiced to recognize racism, have a muscle that's practiced to recognize sexism, but ableism, not yet. And that's where I'm so thankful for this PTSA and the students involved in this discussion.
Right, because that message is, that's our goal here, the message to be carried forward. All right, we're going to segue over to Kurt Yeager, who is a disabled actor, writer, everything extraordinaire. So Kurt, I'm going to move over to you. And as somebody, you know, involved with the disability community within the entertainment industry, how do you explain the wide-reaching success of Crip Camp, and what do you think it means for actors, directors, and producers with disabilities?
Yeah, thank you for including me in part of this this panel. I am a white male, scruffy beard-ish face, unshaven, with a black t-shirt on, Caucasian. I think the explanation is right in front of our face. I think it was the success is directly correlated to the stories being told directly by people with disabilities and controlling the narrative. And that is indicative of the lack of representation in film and television. A writer's room has 98% of all writers' rooms don't have a person with a disability in them. And the only shows that have writers with disabilities are specifically about, generally with the storylines about disabilities. And so I can explain that the narrative of this particular story in this film was so successful because it was controlled. It was managed and told through the same people that are trying to tell those stories. So those tropes go away. The tropes of it only being some kind of magical thing to overcome or the worst day of your life. And it's the worst thing ever. And neither of those hold water in all circumstances. The trope of storytelling in film and television for the last 90 years, since one of the original films, Freaks, if you want to go watch a film, which is really interesting. But the narrative has always been told by an able-bodied person. And so the perception of that is always skewed into those tropes, and that has ingrained that perspective. And one way that I sort of understand the brokenness of storytelling when not including people with disabilities and writers with disabilities is that in an able-bodied person's narrative, a disability is a character trait. So they'll ask me, hey, how do I write a wheelchair user? Let's say a female wheelchair user. And I say, well, write a character and then cast a female wheelchair using actress. And they look confused and they go, what do you mean? And I go, well, first of all, a wheelchair is not a character trait. It's a mode of transportation. And then you see the light bulbs just start going, wait, no. And I'm like, because you have every type of person who uses a wheelchair. The wheelchair is irrelevant. My prosthetic leg doesn't have attitude. It doesn't have an opinion. It doesn't, define something. Like I might have personality and put that into the prosthetic leg, but it is an irrelevant, benign, non-sentient entity. It's an irrelevancy. So I think as an extension of the success of the film, we could say directly that if in front of the camera representation, in order for it to be authentic and dynamic, must have behind the camera representation of people with disabilities. Without that, you'll never get authentic storytelling. Personally, I've been on, 56, 7 episodes of television, films, 50 commercials, etc. And I don't know how many times that I have to portray a character has lost their limb, and it doesn't matter if it was yesterday or 10 years ago, it was still the worst day of my life. And it was the only thing that has defined my existence since then. When I actually say losing my father was the worst day of my life, and then getting a divorce was the second worst day of my life. The leg is way back there, it's a different thing. And they never, at least from my perspective, it's never written in as a positive thing. Like I actually learned who my family were because I went through a personal tragedy. I learned who some of my friends weren't. I was accepted by a new community. I learned a lot about empathy. I learned a lot about justice. I learned a lot about difference. I mean, there's so much I gained from it that I became a better human. And that story is almost unequivocally not told. And then on top of that, just having characters that happen to have disabilities inside of a film or a TV show where it's not important is also never told. So I think the direct idea of the success of the film was because people with disabilities had control. And that is, it doesn't mean they have, total control, right? You
Right.
probably had the executive producers that you were like doing things with, and but it was the collective, and it was an equal amount of power and control, so the dynamics weren't undulating in a flawed perspective. I have writer friends who are writing on TV shows today, who write in characters with disabilities that have the executives take them out. And they can't do anything about it. They'll lose their position. So they don't want to make too big of a stink about it. So I think we just need to work on creating a better pipeline for writers and directors and producers, because the current pipeline is built off of ableism. For instance, in the writer's room, in order to become a writer, you generally have to be a writer's assistant. And in order to be a writer's assistant, you have to be a gopher, meaning you run around town doing things, helping get sandwiches, doing errands and all the other things, which is based off an ableist perspective. So it's it's a very, very difficult thing to navigate, breaking down not only the difficulty of being a writer, but then breaking down the ableist system of how to become one. And then on top of that, having to fight the normal things of becoming a writer. So
right. And I'm so glad you're there and you're representing this mindset and this view, and really kind of explaining to us the importance of pipeline, because pipeline is important in many different disciplines, careers and jobs. And unless we have the voices of people with disabilities at all those different levels, then, kind of integrating just that normal experience of disability is unheard. And so I think that message is so important and so powerful. And I know even as a psychologist, right, there's still things that go on today in training of psychologists where let's put, medical doctors into a wheelchair and have them go around for a day so they know our experience. And I will have very smart psychology trainees say to me, how is that different than asking somebody to paint their face black and walk, and go around their day? So making kind of those similar or looking at those commonalities between other marginalized groups and how we represent people and how they have those experiences is so important. So I'm so glad you're there, Kurt. Thank you so much for your comments. And we'll be coming back to the group with other questions. I have one final person that I want to get to, Dr. Anjali Forber-Pratt, my disabled sister, friend, colleague. Welcome. I'm so happy that you're here today. And, Dr. Forber-Pratt, I know your work. You have done some of the most groundbreaking research on disability identity. And I want you to tell us a little bit about what you think. What does Crip Camp tell us about disability identity, and how does it match or not match up with the research that you've completed in this area?
Awesome, absolutely. So first of all, a quick image description. I'm an Indian woman with brown skin sitting in a manual wheelchair that you can't see on screen. And I'm wearing a blue and white tie-dyed top. And also not on screen, I have a black service dog named Colton, who helps me out a lot day to day. So I think, first of all, something that's important to ground this, my response to this question is what we mean by disability identity. So disability identity is this strong sense of self about a person's disability, feelings, and connection to this broader disability community. And having a strong, sense of disability pride or this disability identity is also, something that serves as a buffer when you experience those ableist things or hear those ableist comments and have to deal with inaccessibility and things like that. One of the really important pieces with disability identity is that there's both an internal component as well as those external components. So it's as much as it is what it is that you think of your disability from within yourself, as well as that power of that connection to the community. And we saw that so many times in Crip Camp, like everything from being at camp to being all together in terms of the sit-ins and the protests and things like that, but also that sense of community of everyone coming together, regardless of the type of disability, whether it was a visible disability or a hidden disability or multiple disabilities. And so I see so many aspects of disability identity throughout the entire film. I also think, and going back to one of the comments that was made earlier too, from my work, we also know that one of the really important internal processings about disability identity is also frustration and anger. And I think it's really important to not minimize that. And I think that that's also been something that has set my work, in particular in this area, apart from many scholars, many non-disabled scholars who have tried to look at this sort of acceptance of disability, is that this anger and frustration was never talked about. And I like to say, as very, very much what Kurt was saying as well, I think that part of that is because I'm a disabled scholar engaging in this work. And so I knew that that was, something that was important. And so we found a way to study that, and we found a way to make sure that that was a part of this representation of disability identity. So all that to say, I think that Crip Camp aligns beautifully with what we know in terms of the research on disability identity, and I think that we see a large part of that, both from the stories of Judy and from the others and at camp with her, and all of that, all the way through to the making of the film itself.
Thank you, Dr. Forber-Pratt. I know, I want to go to camp.
Yes.
I'm going to go like right now. So thank you so much. Okay, we are going to I'm so impressed with this discussion and the important information that we're sharing with our community here. I am going to now introduce to you Dina. Dina she's our one of our students at Peninsula High, and Dina, you're going to help us ask the last question. So we have one final question that we're going to ask every single panelist. And Dina, you want to take that away?
Thank you all so much for being here. I watched Crip Camp and it was so impactful and thought-provoking. I really hope that it starts discussions in our community about disability and ableism, because they're such important topics and I feel like we don't discuss them enough. Oh wait, first, image description. I am a Middle Eastern and North African teen with fairly light skin, black glasses, and very curly brown hair. So my question is, please give us one suggestion that would help our high school community to move forward towards being a more inclusive campus for students and staff with disabilities.
All right. So we can go in any order here, but I mean, we can actually, we can go a little out of order. Kurt, do you want to take that away first?
Mine broke up a little bit. Could you ask the question again?
Sure. Dina, do you want to?
Sure. So please give us one suggestion that would help our high school community to move forward towards being a more inclusive campus for students and staff with disabilities.
That's a really interesting question, because I'm trying to think of how it relates to, my experiences to high school. I remember there was this one young man named Jerry who, came from another country and had polio. And so he used crutches, and he was included in all aspects of high school. And so no one thought of him as being special or different or unique in a negative way. And since he was just incorporated naturally, then everyone treated him equally because he was equal. So I think that the integration of peoples into all aspects of the high school experience and the adjustments of it is part of what, the human experience is all about, is learning how to deal with people who are different than yourself. And I think if it starts there, then I would make that suggestion of trying to figure out unique ways to include everybody in the special classes into all the regular experiences that you have.
Okay, thank you, Kurt. Judy, did you want to take it away?
Yeah, I think you should use the uniqueness of your campus. And for me, as an outsider, you have today's program. Is it being translated into all these different languages? Or do you have interpreters for, okay, so, I mean, that in and of itself is very unique. And I would say that one thing you could look at was learning about how disabled people are depicted in other countries. Because I think there's a real value of learning about the global disability rights movement. But also, I believe it's important for immigrants and for people in our country to understand some of the ways disability is viewed. So Kurt, speaking about this gentleman who I think you said was from an Asian country and had polio, it may well be that he was integrated into the campus life. It also may well be that he will have difficulty being accepted by people in the broader community for things like marriage or employment. So I think we all in the US, our communities, look at those of us with disabilities in many ways as being inferior, like Cindy being asked whether her daughter is smart. And that's really a deeper question besides being rude and insulting and terrible to ask that kind of a question, but it also says some other things. So if I'm looking at one thing, it would be learn about what's going on in other countries from the communities people are in.
Great.
But if I never can stay to one, I also think it would be very valuable to see if there can be a more open discussion about disability. And by that, I mean, there are those people who have visible disabilities. My presumption is that many of the people on your campus who may have an IEP or a 504 plan may well be people with mental health disabilities or other forms of disabilities that aren't seen, diabetes and things of that nature, lupus, whatever. It would be great if there is an atmosphere on campus where people feel that it is okay to discuss themselves and how they are feeling in a way that really is created by the people on campus. Because I think that's one big issue, huge issue. And that is that when you look at the fact there are 61 million disabled people in the United States, a substantial number of those people have invisible disabilities. And even if they may know about it, they are frequently afraid to discuss it because they're not going to get into a certain university program, or they won't get hired, or they won't get advanced. So really building up strength, both of the disabled individuals and others on campus, to understand what people are going through, I think would be great.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Judy. That's such important advice for us. Nicole, do you want to give us your one suggestion for our community?
Sure, and to Terry's point from the chat, I use she, her pronouns, and I apologize for not having stated that earlier. I think as a non-disabled person who worked in partnership to tell this story with disabled colleagues, I think it's important to think about how do you nurture the role that non-disabled people can play in terms of achieving justice. And I think that oftentimes that comes in the form of taking the onus on yourself to call out something that isn't accessible or that's ableist when you see it, When I met Jim, it was 20 years ago, and he was the sound mixer, that I came to work on my films. And we would go to diversity panels at Sundance. And Jim always made sure if there was a diversity panel that he was there, because he knew he was going to have to, at the end of the panel, say, wait a minute, you're forgetting people with disabilities, And I think it took me, unfortunately, too long to realize that that wasn't Jim's job, that we can all do that. We can all say, hey, why are you having this party in an inaccessible location? And I think as people start to, especially as the conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion become a lot more sophisticated with the younger generation, which is really exciting. I just think it's so critical that everybody takes responsibility for making sure that disability is included in those conversations.
Thank you, Nicole. That whole concept of being an ally and, talking about these issues when they're not being represented and knowing how to interject them and practicing how you might say that. I think that is so important. And to know that it's hard to do that. It's hard for people with disabilities to do that because we do it all the time, right? So having allies and people who are also paying attention to those conversations is just crucial with it. So I so appreciate that point. Thank you so much. Dr. Forber-Pratt, you want to give us your takeaway?
Yes, and also to Terry's comment, I also use she, her pronouns. I would actually echo much of what Nicole was saying in that like expecting disability to be a part of diversity conversations. And so what I would encourage the campus community to continue doing is that anytime these conversations that are more broader about diversity issues come up, that we're thinking about disability and that we're thinking about the diversity from within the disability community as well. So making sure that we're not privileging one disabled voice over another and just kind of working as a community to engage in these conversations so that it does become just a regular conversation.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Forber-Pratt. I appreciate that. Cindy Lou, do you have some parting advice for our campus community?
Oh, I do. I'm full of opinions over here. So first of all, I think having the student ask this question is to encourage students to keep asking such questions. And I would say, ask who is not at the table during the design phase. Inclusion comes in the design phase. And when we were working on this, we asked, well, who do we need to, what can we do to make people feel as though they belong? What languages, what image descriptions, and those types of things. So on your campus, whether it be the prom committee or ASB, ask who's not there, who's not at the table, and work really hard to get those first person voices there. I would also encourage, and I know there's a lot of school district folks there, but inclusion starts really young because I think our young kids just have a natural sense of justice. I've tried over and over in kindergarten to say, hey, you want to learn about Down syndrome? And they're like, no, what kind of ice cream does Sandy like? Does she like trolls? And I think kids have the natural lens of seeing the human being first. And so I would encourage that inclusive mindset to start early, avoid silos and segregated classrooms. That's a much larger thing. And then the third thing is think beyond your campus. If we're talking about equity, I think for me, the definition of equity is access plus representation. So much of the work of the heroes in the room today is about physical access, but we need access to whatever system you're in. Again, if it's ASB, prom committee, band, whatever that system may be, provide the access and provide the representation within those groups.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Don't ask people.
Thank you. All right, Jim, what would you like to leave us with?
Boy, these are incredible answers. And I just want to say that, Nicole and I and Judy have been on a lot of panels, but this has been really wonderful. So I'm so glad to be with everybody. I want to pick up on just one point here. Cindy, absolutely. It's so easy for any movement to be siloed, but it's very, very important that we all be talking to each other. Disability cuts across all strata of society. So, I think it's our responsibility, like it's been mentioned, is that who's not in the room, who's not here. I put a link into the chat about that is a disability justice primer. And disability justice, for people that don't know what it is, excuse me, is looking at disability rights through the lens of people that have been marginalized within the community. I'm talking about people of color, LGBTQ And it's been, it's really, for me, I look upon folks in this movement as the modern day, a very, very important part of the modern day push for rights in society. And so I really encourage people to take a look at this movement and learn more about it, because I think that it's also winds up being very relevant to younger people who are really more interested in intersectionality. And I think this is perhaps a relatively unknown part of the disabled community.
I just want to say one
Thank
other
you.
thing, sorry. I think for those of you, well, depending, whatever community you're coming from, so I identify as a Jewish disabled woman, and I've been spending a reasonable amount of time over the last couple of years doing activities within the Jewish community, and raising very similar issues and discussions like we're having here. I encourage you that belong to other communities to really dig in deeper with those communities and really begin to get them to take more ownership in the roles that they are or are not playing in helping to advance the inclusion of disabled people.
Thank you, Judy. And thank you, Jim. And Sins Invalid is an amazing organization. That primer is unbelievable for any group who wants to kind of get going on this idea of disability justice, and actually visiting that organizational webpage. It's just, they're just really great. There's so many amazing young people with disabilities who have really taken hold of the movement and are trying to push it, move forward with it, which is what all of us who are in the older generation really want to see. We want to see that baton passed, and we want to see it. We want to see these issues look differently in the future. We're going to, mindful of time, we're coming together here. I just, want to say that the information that we received today and all of your voices means so much to me as a disabled mom, a psychologist, and all the roles that I have. I can't thank you all enough for coming. And I do realize there's some questions in the chat, which were once we kind of close here, because I'm mindful of some people's time and our interpreters. I'll turn it over to Jean for a minute, and we'll figure out what we're going to do with those questions. But I just really want, I really want our administration, our teachers, our students to really take these challenges that we've talked about today very seriously. Jean has been saying on and off, this is not a one-off. We're taking this, we're running with this. And I really believe that this committee and our organization wants to do that. I really want to challenge Palos Verdes Peninsula High, because I know that we're a high school who really prides itself on academic excellence, and we do so great in that area. I would really love to see our campus also let's try to be a school of excellence for students with disabilities. Let's take it up a level for our students who have 504 plans and IEPs. And those who don't, but who need access. Let's really kind of take some direction in our special education services to not make this a one-off and really embrace this. Let's go for those awards. So thank you all for being here. Jean, did you want to address any of the questions over here, or how would you like to do this part of the show?
Oh, thank you, Linda. I want to thank you for moderating so well. And Dina, you're so articulate. Really appreciate all the students here. And I began by thanking all the panelists, and I'm going to conclude that way as well. You are just such wonderful role models, all so intelligent and articulate, and showing really all the possibilities of what should be. And I want to make a call to action for the students here. Like Linda's really caught on to the message, which is, I don't want this webinar to be a one-off. It is a jumping off point for our community. I want to be like Nicole and be an ally. And so what I'd like to encourage the students to do who are viewing, and also I know we have leaders in the national and state PTA, so thank you so much for joining us here. It's really important that we don't, that we continue to focus on this topic. And I like to make the call to action that students look into the sinsinvalid.org combination and see if we, start a committee and move forward. And I like to invite the panelists back so that we can have a follow-up. So if you're all willing, we would be very grateful for you to be back. So that's
Sign
an
me up.
invitation, a call to you too.
Sign me up.
We will. We will sign you all up. Thank
There's
you.
another organization you should look at, and that's called Forward Doc. Jimmy, I think, has heard of it. It's he helped set it up, but it's an organization of disabled people who are documentary filmmakers who have gotten together because their voices were not being heard appropriately across the documentary filmmaking area. I think they're a great group, and they're an example of what we see happening, not just in the area of media, but disabled people finally recognizing the importance of having to come together to bring our voices together to have a bigger impact.
Excellent. Thank you, Judy. Thank you. And thank you.
I have one more.
Mhm.
Sorry, I have one more suggestion as a way to, if students want to organize something off campus, I think helping individuals with disabilities gain access to voting, helping register to vote, regardless of where your political leanings may be. I think access to voting and that kind of representation is very, very meaningful and powerful.
And if you want to follow that, we have our campaign, Crip the Vote. We can thank Alice Wong, who is another disability activist extraordinaire, many other people who have been trying to provide accessibility and inclusion for voting. So thank you, Cindy, for bringing that up. I appreciate it. Okay. And I
want to quickly acknowledge I'm sorry, Linda. I want to quickly acknowledge Celia Jaffe, California State PTA President, for being here. Thank you so much for making this a priority in your Sunday and joining us. Thank you.
Yes, and I see Beth Meyerhoff on, who's been leading our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee. Thank you, Beth, for amazing work this year. Thank you.
Let's give a shout out to the interpreters, by the way.
Yes, yay. Thank you for letting us all be here and have this conversation. We appreciate you all so much. And it sounds like we're going to see you all again soon. So be looking for that email or that point of contact. Thank you. I am honored to have been among all of you. Jean, did you have?
Feel free to stick around. We wanted to be mindful.
Yep.
Yes, I'm sorry. Feel free to, we wanted to be mindful of the time for our panelists. So we made this an hour event, but anyone who would like to stay, especially the panelists, please do. Thank you.
Yep, I'm happy to hang around too. Are there any questions here that we wanted to take a look at?
There was one from our, there was one from board member Linda Reed. She's a board member in our, a member of our Board of Education. Okay. And Rick Phillips is also here. So Linda, I'm sorry, it's been in the chat a while ago, so we're trying to find it.
Okay, I'm trying to scroll up. If somebody else sees it and can, I might be slower with the scrolling here. If somebody wants to read it out and you see it before I do, go for it. Help a disabled sister out here.
Question. I got it. I'll help a sister out. Question from Linda Reed. As a school board member and daughter of a longtime wheelchair user, actually somebody else read they're taking, they just came in and told me to shh. So Linda,
The question from Linda Reed, Board of Education member for Palos Verdes Peninsula School District. As a school board member and daughter of a longtime wheelchair user, I find your discussion as applied to young people to be very meaningful. Much progress has been made over the last 30 years, thanks to people like Judy. My question is, what is the best way the next generation can support the disability rights movement going forward?
Okay, I think we touched on that a bit, right, with our final question. Judy, did you have any other comments to that one?
Yeah, I think knowledge is power. And in California, for example, I know that they have a program, I don't know who runs it anymore, for young people with disabilities to come together meeting other young people with disabilities. So I think that is a really important objective, which is to allow disabled kids to come together, because it's great that, you know, we're being more integrated, but in the integration process, people are also losing or not gaining the ability to be with other disabled people and to be able to discuss and share things that may well be happening that they feel like they're experiencing them by themselves because they're not able to talk to any other people really. Athletics, I think, is really great, and looking at Linda and Anjali, I think, is very important as two Paralympians, being able to talk about, you know, why did you join the sports? What did sports mean to you? What was the value of being able to be with other disabled individuals as you were becoming proficient in sports? But I really think the ability for disabled young people to come together is very important. Look at some of the national organizations and centers for independent living and whatever may exist to expose children and teenagers to other groups and allow people to recognize the fact that it is okay to talk about how they feel when they are experiencing whatever word you want to use, ableism, discrimination. People need to be able to identify their emotions and articulate them so that it doesn't become a roadblock, but really can help people become empowered.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you. Right. We have very few incentives as those of us who grew up with disabilities to kind of identify with one another. At least historically, there haven't been a lot of, you know, there hasn't been a lot of push around that. And it's so powerful. I mean, looking at Dr. Forber-Pratt's research, and as well as just what we know about community and coming together, and psychologically what it's like to feel known, right? Feel like that somebody knows you and gets you in some way. So other comments on how we can go for Cindy, is that you?
Oh, it is me, sorry.
That's
Again,
okay.
full of opinions over here.
That's okay, we like that.
So yeah, you say that now. But what I was thinking too is there's also guidance on plain language. So, and that really helps those with intellectual disabilities. There's federal guidance on plain language, so we can use that on the websites and things like that. And I see something in the chat where someone asked, do you have any suggestions to promote disability awareness in elementary school? And so if I may, I'd like to try to answer that.
Sure.
Take that, I'll
Go
take
for
the
it.
silence as a yes.
Go for it, yeah.
I think non-segregated classrooms, inclusive campuses is the best way to promote a sense of belonging. I personally would like to get away from teaching kindness only, because kindness sometimes can feel like erasure. What I'd actually like, and that's not from me, that's from someone who wrote a book called Sitting Pretty, so I stole that quote. But I do think that in addition to promoting or talking about kindness, talking about empathy, or providing a place, space to ask questions, you know, even just as simple as saying hi. So I think for elementary, I would like to get away from disability awareness weeks and days and t-shirts and that kind of stuff, because for me, it's a moment of awareness, which I can appreciate the impetus behind it. However, that long-term belonging comes from much harder work. And I think people with putting the effort into the week of awareness can feel as though they've done the job, but that's not the job, right? The job is to bring awareness and continue the long tail of the work. So for elementary, I think having you know, peer interactions, having inclusive classrooms, thinking about least restrictive environment in a different way. Special education is not a place, it's a service, all those things. So
Thank you, Cindy.
Read Supreme Court Justice Sonia. I'm not pronouncing her last name at the moment. Yeah, she's got a children's book out, and in that book, she discusses diabetes. My book is coming out in a young adult version. Books for children, teenagers, and adults written by disabled individuals. Alice Wong's anthology. I mean, there are many things out there now. I think integrating the literature and films that are out there, bring speakers in, see if there are any kids in school, particularly in the high school, who could talk to younger people. Sotomayor, I can't believe I forgot her name. Set up a mentoring program, where it could be high school students or maybe college students, something for the parents also, because I think parents really need to be able to talk about their concerns with disabled adults who can help them walk through this.
Great.
There's also a children's book called All the Way to the Top. There's also a children's book called All the Way to the Top, written by, I forgot, but she participated in the Capitol Crawl as an 8-year-old. Her name escapes me right now.
Okay. And Dr. Forber-Pratt, you put a book in there too, I see.
I did, yes, it just came out. It's called We Move Together. It just recently came out. It's fabulous from a disability justice and intersectionality perspective. And I also wanted just to echo, I think it was Rick put in the chat a comment about why is it that we don't learn about disability history in our history books. And I think that this was actually something that I was going to say in terms of what do we hope for the next generation in terms of engagement with the disability rights movement, which is, right now there's 24 states in the United States that do have some disability history as part of the statewide curriculum. That's only half of our states. And so, and we also know that not all curriculum is created equal. So, so I don't know, I have not looked at all of the states that do have it, but I think that that's an area for growth and an area to expand and for young people to ask that question to your school boards and to ask that question of why isn't this a part of what we're learning and how do we change that?
Yeah, the great question, great response. Yeah, we need to be talking about this early, and we need to be talking about it in the right way, right? So in the psychology world, we talk, oh, let's increase awareness. Awareness is part of it, but actually, if you look at what really needs the most work is behavior change. So implementation of that. So do people follow through with our call to actions, or how do we help them to understand what the message is and how they can best promote it?
And go on to the American Association of People with Disabilities website. There's a new award that's being offered. And I think there's 2 in middle school, 2 in high school, 2 in college, and they're going to be starting something for young adults. It's called the Human Alexander Award. There's an award that they give out called the Paul Hearn Award, and Elijah Alexander applied for it to set up a scholarship program in my name, and I encourage that we do it with his name and my name, because then it would be intergenerational. So it'll be giving out $1,000, there'll be $6,000 awards that will be given, and something also in elementary school. The other thing I would suggest is that you get the kids involved and ask them to read some books and recommend books that they think would be good to read. That I think would be a really interesting project.
Absolutely. And Dina, I'm not going to really call you out on this, but I am. So on one of our committee meetings, you were talking about like, perhaps a project around the lack of representation of literature that, that represents people of color and people who of diverse backgrounds. I actually think this would be an awesome thing for us to take on about the inclusiveness of disability in that project as well.
And if you look at Disability Visibility, Alice Wong's anthology, it's a great book for many reasons. One of them is the authors of the articles not only have different disabilities, but come from a broad array of backgrounds. So looking at what they've written and then following some of those writers, and yeah.
Awesome, thank you. There are other thoughts? So there's a comment here from, I'm sure I've lost a lot along the way. So, I mean, I think, this might be a good point to just say, we're compiling the resources that we're giving here today, and we're gonna put that together. And Beth or Lori or Jean, can somebody leave us with an email address or a way to contact us? What would be the best way if somebody wants to follow up with us after this presentation today? What would you suggest? Lori?
We have a contact on our website.
Okay.
And we also are on social media, on Facebook and Instagram. You can message us, Palos Verdes Peninsula High School PTSA.
Awesome.
Or as we have it in the Zoom grid, PVPHS PTSA. A lot of capital letters there. And just message us and we will respond to you. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome. Any other final words? All right, so I will bid farewell to you one more time. I guess we really just don't want to say goodbye. So thank you all again. Judy, thank you for your presence today and your generosity with your time. Thank you for your fight. All of our panelists, thank you so much for being here. Interpreters, you help us access the world in a different way. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.